Giannis Antetokounmpo was probably the biggest example of what happens to a superstar that plays in a small market when their 15 seconds of media attention runs out. To be fair, it was a good bit longer than 15 seconds, but the way people talk about him is so interesting because if you just went by the shit people say about him, you'd think he was a 6'7" guard or small forward that's just never been able to shoot and it drags his team back or something. He's a big guy that just happens to sometimes play like a guard in the Bucks offense. Acting like he must be able to shoot to be respected as a scorer has always been strange to me. Giannis went from universally acknowledged as a genuine contender for best player in the world to an afterthought in the last couple seasons, and it's kind of weird. When you look at his numbers and what he's been doing on the court, he's not only almost unmatched in the modern day, he's unmatched amongst the all-time greats too. He's the only power forward to ever average 30 back-to-back seasons, and this year he's averaging 32. Last season, he broke the record for highest field goal percentage in a season where a player averaged 30 points with 61.1%. This season, he's at 61.4%. The only power forward all time with more triple-doubles than him is Domantas Sabonis. He also has the most 30-point games by any player since 2015. By any player. Here's a list of players that peaked after that year. James Harden, who averaged 36 and 34 in that time period, by the way. Steph, LeBron, Dame, AD, Westbrook, and pretty much most of the other notable players left in the NBA today. He's not ringless, so you can't really use that to knock him. In fact, he had one of the greatest finals performances in the history of the league. 35 points per game, 13 rebounds on 62% from the field, and 2 blocks a game while dropping 50 in a closeout game. He doesn't have the defense flaw like a guy like, let's say, Jokic does. In fact, he's got a Defensive Player of the Year, and to this day is still a great defender. He's never really had a long stretch where he played like shit for a couple months and his rep dropped or anything. In fact, over the last couple of seasons, he's played the best basketball of his career. So what happened? It's not like nobody acknowledges that he's good. It's the fact that a lot of people brush aside the actual scale of his level of play, especially on an all-time scale. Somebody on Twitter the other day suggested that Giannis was already a top 3 power forward ever, and he got a wave of backlash from people talking about Dirk, Barkley, and KG. Nostalgia bias is one thing, but a side effect of that, which I call rear view mirror bias, is just as bad in my opinion, and it leads to modern downplaying. Modern downplaying is when people don't fully appreciate a current player in comparison to older players, because since we watch the current player every day, we see their ups and downs, and their bad games and moments are fresh on our mind, while all people remember from the legends are their highlight reels and their best moments. There's no universe where Charles Barkley can be compared to Giannis overall. Maybe in like 2020, but not anymore. Last few seasons have separated Giannis from honestly almost any other power forward scoring rise with the sheer dominance and efficiency. The gap defensively is wide enough to firmly put Giannis a tier above Barkley, not to mention the ring and the all-time great finals performance. Even Dirk isn't much of an argument anymore to me. Sure, you can say he's the more versatile scorer on offense, but when you really look at it, I mean, that's like all he has on Giannis. Giannis is far more dominant inside as a scorer, obviously, and gaps him as a defender. They each have one significant playoff run, like really significant playoff run, and Giannis's was better individually, especially their finals performance. For me, Duncan is obviously the clear number 1, and KG is a lock for top 3 power forward ever. Him suffering on the Timberwolves all those years really hurt his reputation, because we're talking about arguably the greatest two-way player ever. Malone's longevity is the only thing that's keeping it an argument between him and Giannis, but it's really not preposterous to call him a top 3 power forward ever with his resume. Even amongst his modern peers and in the eyes of the media today, we often see Giannis treated as the other guy that's also there. Last year, he got 1 first-place vote for MVP after averaging 30 on record-breaking efficiency while defending better than all 3 players voted above him. He's been heavily disrespected as a scorer throughout his career due to his lack of a three-point shot, which never made much sense to me. People only treat Giannis like this, by the way. Everybody acts like he isn't allowed to be mentioned amongst the all-time great scorers because he's not a great shooter. But when you're that efficient and that dominant inside, why does it matter? It didn't matter for Shaq either. They got Brook Lopez out there hitting 30-footers anyway. Who cares if Giannis isn't Karl Anthony Towns from deep? The whole run and dunk and unskilled BS, as if it doesn't take a lot of skill, footwork, and intelligence to put up 30 every night on 60% from the field is nasty work. I think some of the anti-foreigner bias plays into it too. Some people love denying the fact that it exists, but guys like Gilbert Arenas have proved that there's a lot of contempt for Europeans that come to the league and dominate. Combine that with the fact that he stayed in a small market his whole career, he can't even get the big city boost that a lot of players' reputations get when they move to LA or Chicago or New York or Philly. The final nail in the coffin was definitely the early playoff exits in recent seasons, which were all partially because of unfortunate injuries. The 2022 playoffs, they just barely lost to the Celtics in the conference semis. The 2023 playoffs, he got hurt in the first game of the first round against Miami and then was forced to rush back for game 4 and 5, which the Bucks lost. Last season's playoffs, he didn't even play in the Bucks' first round loss to the Pacers in 6 games. Late playoff performances are where legends are made, so I guess when you factor in the fact that he hasn't seen a conference finals in 3 years and hasn't made it past the first round since the 2021 season, it's understandable that he started to become a slight afterthought despite his consistent dominance. It is important to remember that he's barely had a healthy playoff run at all since his championship though. This year, there was obvious chemistry and roster issues to start the season, especially with Middleton's injury, but they're slowly starting to steady the ship, and Giannis has obviously been the biggest factor in that. I really don't think they missed the playoffs at all. The East being toilet water is going to help a lot. I mean, they have a losing record and they're the 5th seed. Come on now. But these playoffs are crucial to Giannis's legacy and the way he's looked at as a player, and getting past the Cavs and Celtics won't be easy whatsoever.